Hello everyone, this is Prakash from Solve IT. This video presents some fundamental information to help you estimate your Azure pricing. So let's start. Now, there are three main customer types on which available purchasing options are contingent upon. Firstly, the size, the type of customer that you are. When you get yourself an Azure subscription, you can purchase a pay-as-you-go subscription. So you would be identified as a web direct customer. You can proceed to the Azure website and sign up for a subscription, insert your credit card information, and you will then be able to start purchasing resources in Azure. You can also be an enterprise customer where you sign an enterprise agreement with Microsoft. It's a prepaid subscription, so you pre-negotiate an amount and you purchase the enterprise agreement to the value of that amount. And it's paid annually. You can also be a cloud solution provider customer. Cloud solution providers are Microsoft partner companies. Typically, customers hire them to build solutions on top of Azure. So CSPs will value add services on top of your Azure purchase, and they will then charge you for those services on top of Azure. So the payment and billing occurs through the customer's CSP. So what Microsoft does is that they arrange all of their products and services by category in what we refer to as the Azure Marketplace. And you will then be able to select the resources that you want, provision them, and assign the services to your subscription. So a couple of factors affecting costs on Azure. One is resource type. Costs are resource specific. So there's a usage meter on Azure that tracks the usage based on a number of meters. So if it's a virtual machine, the purchase of your VM is based, and the pricing of your VM is based on your CPU and RAM allocation. So if you choose a VM size, and the size is dependent upon the CPU allocation, the RAM allocation to the VM, the number of hard disks that you can attach to the VM, and so on. If you are talking about storage accounts, storage related resources, then the meters would calculate the number of transactions on your storage, the amount of bandwidth consumed by the storage, and so on. Services, the usage rates for these services will differ between web direct customers, enterprise customers, and CSP customers. Location, Microsoft operates data centers in up to 50 regions today, and the usage costs vary between these regions or the locations. So if you purchase a VM and you locate the VM in the Southeast Asia region, the price of the VM could differ from one that is placed in the West US region, for example. I would highlight this difference when we go through the pricing calculator in a bit. There are also zones that factor billing. What does that mean? Bandwidth refers to data moving in and out of Azure data centers. So I mentioned storage accounts earlier, right? There are also other services like web services and so on. Regardless of the service, if you as a user access an application or access storage and attempt to download a file, then that file is egressing out of Microsoft's data center. So there are two parameters here, ingress and egress. Egress refers to data going into the Azure data centers or inbound data. Data going out of Azure data centers or egress is what you're going to be charged for. So inbound data is free, outbound data is chargeable. Pricing is based on zones. What is zone? Zone is a geographical grouping of Azure regions. I operate my business out of Malaysia, and the closest region to us is Southeast Asia, which is in Singapore, and that is parked under Zone 2. So Zone 2 includes Australia Central, Asia Pacific, and so on. So if I download a file from my storage account in Singapore, my download is between Singapore and Kuala Lumpur, and they are both within Zone 2. So I will pay a certain amount for my egress. If I were to have an office in the US and I were to download my data from the Singapore data center, that would be transferred between Zone 2 and Zone 1. So the charges are almost double, right? So take that into consideration as well. So let's look at the pricing calculator. Now this is a snapshot of the pricing calculator, and you're able to add the various services and input, the parameters for the service that you wish to deploy, and the price estimate will then be shown to you. And remember that it is an estimate, so the usage in production will typically be higher than your estimate. So you might want to factor, 15 to 20% above your estimate when you purchase your subscriptions. So I'll run through the pricing calculator once we finish the slide presentation. Now there is another calculator. It's called a total cost of ownership calculator. Now what this calculator does is that it compares on-premise usage against cloud usage, right? But it requires you to input a lot of parameters based on your assumptions. So what Azure does is that, or rather what the calculator does is that it compares the resources that you specify and calculates the resource usage on Azure and compares that against the cost on premise, right? And if you find that the Azure cost is cheaper, then that makes your migration to the cloud viable. I'll also show you how to run the calculator in a bit. Now moving forward, once you're on Azure, Microsoft does give you advice on how to reduce your cost on Azure, your operational cost on Azure. One of the tools that they will share this information with you is the Azure Advisor. So the Azure Advisor, what it does is that it gives you advice across multiple areas. It focuses on performance, it looks at cost, it looks at security, among others. And the one that is relevant to us now is performance and cost. So it monitors a VM, let's say, monitors the consumption, monitors the performance, and if you purchase a particular size, let's say size A2, and Azure Advisor, finds that your utilization, your CPU utilization is very low, then the advice would be for you to reduce the size from A2 to A1, and by doing that, you would then reduce your consumption cost on Azure. And so that's an example of a cost reduction recommendation. You're also free to configure spending limits via policies. There are also Azure reservations, the ability for you to prepay a resource for between a period of 1 and 3 years and receive more discounts. So if you purchase a VM, you can prepay the VM for 3 years and achieve up to 72% savings over a standard pay-as-you-go cost. Right? If possible, attempt to use or try to use low-cost regions. And if you have a chargeback policy, apply tax to your resources so you can identify the users or the resource owners against their consumption. Right? If you look at your subscription in your portal, Azure also provides a cost management perspective that allows you to analyze your usage, and they're also able to forecast your usage over the next billing period, or maybe the next couple of months. And that's, I think, quite useful for users as well. You can also pair the cost management with alerting, so that if your utilization exceeds a certain percentage of your subscription or a certain value in your subscription, then you're able to send yourself alerts as well. So let's look at a quick demonstration of the pricing calculator and the cost of ownership calculator. So I've got both of them here. So the pricing calculator, you can access it by just doing a Google search for Azure Pricing Calculator, and it kind of pops up. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to quickly add a resource. I'm going to add virtual machines. I'm also going to add storage accounts, just to show you two different perspectives. So if I look at virtual machine, right, I'm going to pick a region. And before that, I'm going to go down and change my currency value to Malaysian ringgit. Makes more sense for me here. And I'm going to pick my region. Now take note that my price for this particular VM instance is 641 ringgit. If I were to change my region from West US to Southeast Asia, the price will differ, right? So take that into consideration when you're estimating your pricing on Azure as well. You might want to pick the closest data center to you, which is also maybe the cheapest, right? So in my case, because my business is based out of Malaysia, I'm going to pick Southeast Asia, Singapore as my region. So Southeast Asia, my operating system is Windows. I'm going to estimate pricing only for the OS, and my operating tier is standard, which is what we would recommend for production. right? And these are all the VMs which are available at this tier, at the standard tier. So if I pick a VM like B2MS, it comes with two virtual CPUs, 8 gigs of RAM, 16 gigs temporary storage, and it's priced at about 0.4788 ringgit an hour. Right? So once you determine the VM size that you want, you can also specify the number of VMs of this instance that you want to purchase and specify what your billing option is. So typically, you would estimate for pay as you go. But if you want, if you know for a fact that they're going to be using this VM for the long term, then maybe you can reserve the VM for 3 years and pay a reserve capacity pricing. So that allows you to bring your cost down drastically, right? As you can see, from 349 ringgit a month, I've brought it down to 146 ringgit a month, right? So I'm going to pick one VM and specify whether you want your VM to be backed by managed disks or not, and how many of those disks do you want, and what is your estimated number of transactions. So in order for you to understand the number of transactions that are taking place against your disk, right, it's important for you to, if you are migrating an on-premise server to the cloud, use tools like Performance Monitor to estimate what are the general transactions taking place against your storage, right? So that's for my VM. So if I scroll down and look at my storage account, I can again select the region that I want to place my storage account in, specify the type of storage account. So in my case, I'm going to choose a standard disk storage to store my VM disks, and specify my tier as standard or premium. In this case, premium is backed by solid state drives and standard by non-solid state drives. So if I pick premium as my tier, specify what is the redundancy that I want. Today, Microsoft, they only provide geo redundancy for standard tier. So if you want to provide geo redundancy of your storage, replicating your storage copies from Southeast Asia to East Asia, it's prepared. Then I will choose geo redundancy as well. Specify the capacity that you want. You can see the pricing per GB, and that is my estimated pricing for storage. I can also add my transaction, write, read operations, and so on. And once you have added all that information, you'll be able to see the estimated pricing given to you at the bottom, right? And this is monthly. If you look at the pricing, right, most of these estimations are based on a monthly estimation. So remember to multiply by 12 in order for you to understand your annual estimate. And remember that this is an estimate, right? For the most part, based on my interaction with customers in production, a lot of them, they do go beyond the estimate. But then there are also many mechanisms to help you save and minimize your cost as well. So you can save this estimate, share it with your customers if you are a vendor, and export this out to a file as well, right? So that's pretty much it. That's from the pricing calculator perspective. I haven't gone into the details in the pricing calculator, but this is meant to be a general discussion to get you started, right? If you wish to know more, do drop me a comment or message. Maybe we can arrange a session where I can spend a bit more time with you to go through the pricing calculator. Now, the next calculator I have is the total cost of ownership calculator. And what this does is that it requires you to input some parameters pertaining to your on-premise workload. So for example, if I have front-end web servers now being hosted in my data center, I can then specify the operating system, whether it is physical or virtual, how many VMs do I have, whether they are virtualized via Hyper-V or VMware, what is the number of CPU cores that I'm allocating per VM, the amount of RAM which I'm allocating per VM, and whether you want Microsoft to estimate the pricing based on CPU or memory, right? So that is like one category of server workload. So if you have other categories like database servers, domain controllers, and so on, by all means add those server workloads as well, right? So that's servers. If you have databases like SQL or non-SQL, you can also add the database workload as well. So if assuming I'm using an enterprise license for SQL based on physical servers, and I have 4 of those servers, 4 physical processors with 4 cores per physical processor, and 32 gigs of RAM allocated for the server, and I want Azure to optimize by CPU. And when you migrate this database into Azure, which service you want to migrate to, Azure SQL or Azure SQL managed instance, allowing you to integrate the database servers into your own VNets, or a VM with a version of SQL installed inside. This is very similar to an on-premise virtual machine. What is your estimated database size, and what are the maximum concurrent logins that you're estimating for your database, right? If you have local SAN storage and you want to migrate your storage to the cloud, you can also specify the capacity of your storage. And finally, what is the bandwidth consumption in your on-premise environment? So what is the outbound bandwidth? So if I'm estimating 100 gig of outbound bandwidth, you specify the number as well. And then you can adjust the assumptions. I'm again going to change my currency value to Malaysian ringgit, and you can then estimate some of the other assumptions as well. So things like, electricity costs, because data center operations obviously include electricity costs, the cost of your storage. So things like electricity costs, you can just refer to your local power company if you wish. Storage costs, you can get this information from your storage vendors. So if you're working with storage vendors, get this information from them on what is the procurement cost for storage, estimate those numbers. IT labor costs, so what would you estimate for IT labor? We don't pay anywhere close to this much for IT labor in Malaysia, so maybe I'll reduce it to maybe 50 ringgit an hour. And that might be too much, but you know what, it's okay. Specify the number of servers and virtual machines that a single administrator can manage, and that will add to the labor cost as well. So once you have those estimates, you can add other assumptions as well, everything from data center cost, networking to electricity. And once you have all those numbers properly keyed in, and that is definitely going to be time consuming because you have to do proper monitoring on premise to extract the correct information. So once you have the information, what Azure does, or rather what Microsoft does, is that they will estimate your cost on premise over 5 years, because typical data center life cycle is about 5 years. And so my total cost operating on premise over 5 years is going to be about 13 million ringgit, well, 13,300,000, about that. And my Azure cost over 5 years is only about 274,000 ringgit, right? So you can see a drastic difference in the cloud cost as opposed to on-premise. So it's a no-brainer for me to migrate to the cloud. You are also able to see the breakdown in the way they've calculated this costing as well. And again, I must emphasize that the accuracy of this comparison is based on the assumptions that you keyed in earlier, right? So once you have that information, save this information so that you can use it as your supporting document. So typically when I work with customers, we'll do this together so that they're very clear on what is expected of them when they go to the cloud in terms of pricing. So that together with the pricing calculator will give you a very clear understanding on what you're expected to pay for your Azure subscription costs, right? So I hope that has been helpful for you. If you have any questions, please post them in the comment section below. And that's it. Thank you for watching.